Botched execution, the hanging of Thomas Kitchman. Kitchman was a well-known scientist. Um, Sometime around, I don't know, when 1900, for me it was about 1980, 1990, somewhere around there realistically. I'm not exactly sure, but I was fairly well known. I mean, I've always been pretty well known. Inventor of steam, inventor of flight, inventor of so many things. And so at some point in time, creator of spirits and wine and through my silly different things, that basically became legend, became everything. But at some point in time, I, I had been, my government had been doing nuclear generators, nuclear power plants, nuclear rockets, nuclear everything. So at some point in time in the past, let's say 1900, I guess, somewhere around in there, my people had nuclear science down pretty damn well, really damn well. I mean, like I said, they were able to create small, little, compact nuclear reactors. So for the first time ever, at some point in time, and these are the botched executions of the hanging of Thomas Kitchman. I think he might have been a teacher or something. There were a couple scientists from all around the world that actually came, but basically for the first time ever, so at some point in time in the past, 1900 or somewhere, I don't know, because of the danger of nuclear energy and radiation, I kept it kind of like top secret, not really top secret, but just like the public could not do nuclear rockets. Not possible. Because it was too dangerous. Because if a rocket explodes, bad. So, for the first time ever, in what would be known as the botched executions, the hanging of Thomas Kitchman, they did public civilian nuclear rockets. Yeah. Which was basically where my nuclear physicists, my government people, my specialists, the best of the best, the people who have been doing nuclear rockets forever, basically because of who I am. It was funded by me. I paid for it. For the first time ever, the civilians were going to get a crack at nuclear rockets. And so basically, my experts worked with just local scientists or local, the top people from around the world were told of the existence of nuclear rockets and basically kind of how they worked. And they kind of had this idea of how they would work anyway. So what happened was people were going to be able to test fire their nuclear rocket engines, I believe. And what happened, and a giant bell was created to basically contain the nuclear rockets and all that, in kits, so they wouldn't explode and send shrapnel everywhere if they didn't work, or whatever. I think they were maybe launching them into space. I'm not exactly sure, but if they didn't fire off and go up, a bell would swing over and basically cover them up. I think once they get going, they were going to go fine, but getting them going, it was just the whole problem. It was kind of a dangerous thing, really. I'm surprised it went off so well, but basically, if they didn't launch, then then this giant black bell would swing over and basically seal them up until a crew could get in there and pick it up and carefully let it fizzle out, basically, and then they would pick it up and carry it away using special suits and everything else like that. Geiger counters were pretty well known. Everything was pretty well known. We had nuclear science down pretty well. We had already created nuclear power plant, nuclear generators and all kinds of things, little hockey puck size things. I think those are the fuel cells for them, but I'm not sure. Anyway, though, the whole point though is that for the first time ever, sometime in the past, the public was going to get access to nuclear rockets and be able to try them out for themselves. Of course, they'd be working very closely with a specialist team that are, my people had already done nuclear rockets throughout the years, and my people knew it, although that was regarded top secret or secret. And so for the first time ever, the public was going to be able to do their own version of nuclear rockets. And so they did. My team basically helped some scientists, the top scientists, they had to send in their nuclear rocket ideas, and my people looked them over and went, yeah, okay, we think this will work. And so and then those people were given access to radioactive isotopes under controlled environments. They built the special building for it to contain the nuclear rockets, and they were basically able to build a nuclear rocket, civilian nuclear rocket, in what is known as the box executions of Thomas Kitchem. Um, because one of the first rockets was a Kitchem, and they called it hanging the rocket. They hung rockets basically, and it uses a trap door. And I think the trap door was also a containment facility, to because if the rocket didn't go up, there's a chance it could go boom. So what they did was the rocket would fire, and then the trap door would open, and it would basically go in, and then this big bell would swing over and go on top, I think, to contain any kind of explosion or anything inside there, or the nuclear radiation, something like that. It was a very, 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 very controlled experiment, basically by my people and the civilian people, to make sure that nothing went wrong. And there was an audience a couple miles away that they could go ooh and ah and watch the rockets go off if they went off or go boom. Tickets were sold. People from all over came to watch, and it was one of the little events that I basically kind of oversaw and orchestrated at some point in time in the past. I believe they're saying it happened in 1900. Very famous thing. There was lots of video on it and the different rockets that were tried, and it was basically a civilian nuclear rocket energy test. And actually, some of them actually were fairly successful. And I do believe they actually got some pretty good test fires off of some of the rockets, and controlled environment, of course. And afterwards, the whole site was demoed and cleaned, and and basically it was a very, very small. I think it was 3 buildings or something like that, and features a wooden scaffolding. They built the scaffolding or whatever, and everything, and it was a really, really cool experience. I mean, I love to watch it. I thought it was really neat, and there's records on it somewhere. But yeah, and they test fired the civilian population test fired nuclear rockets for the very, 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 very first time. Nuclear rockets were kept to government applications only up until that point in time. So government, like the American government or say some other government, could test fire a nuclear rocket because they had my experts and the best experts in the world. And the Thomas Kitchem event. Although I think it was called something else, but basically it was civilian nuclear rockets, and it was a rather cool event, and civilians test-fired nuclear rockets, and there were quite a few successes there, and it was put on basically by me and my people, and I don't understand why it would be kept secret, but it was a very, very well known event that happened at some time in the past, because everything was going well. It wasn't really a big deal, and so I decided to put it on. I decided to do it, and they called it hanging, and it featured a trap door. Although nobody actually got hung, it was actually the nuclear rocket engines that were being hung and fired, or nuclear rockets. They kind of, I forget exactly how they did it. I don't know if they actually hung them, but anyway, they used the scaffolding and a thing, and they kept them kind of small to only like a man size, because in case they went boom, I didn't want like boom and nuclear stuff anywhere, and I figured small rockets just the same as a big rocket, so I kept it. I think I put a limit on the size to like a man size nuclear rocket engine, just capable enough to get to orbit. And so they test fired these things, and it featured an underground vault, I believe, and a trap door that would open up, and a big bell that would go boom over the thing to contain it. And they built a brick building, I think. That's a picture of them in front of the building there. And they put the little nuclear rockets inside of cells in case something went wrong, and to contain the nuclear energy. And the civilians, they wore protective clothing, of course, when they were working on it. It was a very controlled experiment, which basically had the American government, or the government's, the Atomic Energy Commission was there basically overseeing it. So they had specialists. It wasn't like some people just playing around, oh, let's see what happens. It was more like the great scholars and teachers were like, oh, let's see what happens, and they sent it in, and they sent in their ideas, and my people said, okay, yeah, okay, we think this will work, we agree, let's do it, and so they test fired, I think, quite a few rockets, quite a few different nuclear rocket ideas that were brought to the brought to my people, or brought to the government, by the civilian population. Where schools like Harvard and other schools like that, and you could enter the thing was, you could be of any nationality and enter your nuclear rocket if you were capable of inventing and designing a nuclear rocket. And it featured quite a few different teams. I think there was an Iranian team and an American team, and a couple different teams from around the world came together, and it was like a world nuclear rocket event. And it was actually I loved it personally. I was like, oh, that's cool, that's awesome, because it was the first time the civilians were actually being able to test fire nuclear rockets, and it featured quite a few good ideas actually. And I think there were 3 or 2 new rocket ideas that my people hadn't really thought of yet, and they decided to try it, and they did. And I think there was actually quite a few quite a few actual real good test fires, but there were also a couple of them that didn't fire, that didn't launch. So it was good on paper, but didn't work out that good in real life. And so that was the Thomas Kitcherin hanging, basically. It was not a real hanging, it was a metaphoric hanging of rockets, a nuclear rocket program, civilian nuclear rocket program.